These are the exhibit halls, just recently opened up a few weeks ago. Yeah, this is just the first step. I still consider this the first baby steps, even though they're big feet taking those steps. This is the beginnings of our native knowledge display, because if you want to know what animals live in the woods, ask the people who have been living here for thousands and thousands of years. They know about them, essentially. And sure enough, when you go back into the native knowledge about the environments in which they live, you can find Sasquatches. They aren't called Sasquatches. The word Sasquatch actually came from the Chehalis Reserve in British Columbia. There was a white teacher named J.W. Burns, and he kept hearing these stories about giant hair-covered Indians living in the woods. So he started collecting them and writing them down. And the word that the First Nations Chehalis tribe uses can't be Englished well. And just various local tribal names for the same animal. They're almost uniformly depicted as with a pursed mouth, like this Zonaqua mask here. This is carved by a native gentleman named Alfred Robertson, a British Columbian, I believe. And they're almost always depicted as that shape of a mouth for two reasons. Number one, they whistle. And sure enough, Sasquatches have been recorded whistling as well. And also they make a whoo, whoo, and sound like that. We call them whoops. Most of these happen to be Pacific Northwest, but there's this interesting thing from Utah, the Wolfman panel. Yeah, which is carved into the rock itself. I took that photograph. I went out there to the deserts of Utah, not far from the Four Corners. And Four Corners areas are very rich in Bigfoot lore, actually. The local Navajo people know all about them.
I've seen a lot of stuff about like footprints and print casts before. I don't think I've ever seen this many hand casts in one spot.
No. There's more than a dozen hand casts in the data set at this point. Think about how many times a day another body part of yours besides your feet touches the ground.
Yeah.
And we have impressions of all of those things. And of course, here's a heel impression. This is taken up in Washington in Gifford Pinchot National Forest from the famous Skookum cast. And of course, we also have some juvenile Sasquatch prints mixed in here because people think, for some reason, that there's only one of these creatures. That's ridiculous. This is a species of undiscovered hominoid, probably a hominin. These casts, I have 3 of them represented here. If you look with the magnifying glass that I designated here, you can see the fingerprints on the bottom of them. You can see them very well over here in the handprint. This handprint is from Missouri. Yeah, if you look over in this area, you can see very closely that there are dermatoglyphics there. And if there's one thing I've learned is that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. You've heard of Murphy's Law? Yep. I've often joked that Murphy must be a Sasquatch. So we named this guy Murphy, and he is just fantastic. I chose this particular one. The artist was named Bo Bruns. He runs a creature replica shop out in Columbus, Ohio, animatronics for haunts and things like that. Yeah. But this is by far the most realistic one I've ever seen. So I knew, obviously, I wanted the best one I could get, and this is it. In fact, I've had witnesses who have observed these animals from very close range, 20, 30, 50 feet away, and they all come in, they nitpick a little bit, like, well, you know what, the one I saw had a little bit more hair, or you know, the one I saw had deeper set eyes, or the skin color was a little bit different, but they all say this is very close to what they have observed, even in the face. When you hear these stories of 10-foot tall Sasquatches, 11-foot, 12 feet tall Sasquatches, I think that's a function of, number one, people being lousy at estimates of height and weight and things like that, but also when you look at this, it's just a big animal. Yeah, and it's just because it's massive. And I think that mass translates to exaggerated height estimates from my witnesses, especially when they're scared and the sightings are so brief. These are all Bigfoot tattoos from fans. We just put it out on social media. Yeah. A couple of them are noteworthy. I mean, there's this guy, his name is Erie Eric. He specializes in Bigfoot tattoos. We have a couple that he has done to people over the years. Sasquatches, like all primates, are vocal animals, and sometimes they can be, I guess, essentially tricked into calling back if you make noises similar to them. And we have about 8 or 10 Sasquatch vocalizations on loop in here. We have some a depiction of some of the other behaviors that have been noted by Sasquatches, including tree breaks, snaps of various sorts. These were donated, or on loan actually, from Dr. Jeff Meldrum's laboratory in Idaho State University. Sasquatches, like all other ape species, have been noted to break trees in various ways. And of course, skeptics write this off as wind and snow and whatnot. But I mean, look at this. Twisted around upon itself several times, and this was found in a line of Sasquatch footprints. This is a video actually taken by a woman named Loretta Crawford just this past May. I think it was May 3rd, 2019. She saw this thing walk out of the woods across the way from her, about 303 yards away. I went down and did an on-site investigation. She took a couple photographs of it because she said it was a very strange looking, very large man. Yeah. And then the more she looked at it, she goes, wait a minute, I don't think that's a guy. This is taken locally as well. A good friend of mine named Randy Chase. Yeah, the Silver Star Mountain photographs. He got 3 pictures of a Sasquatch on top of Silver Star Mountain outside of Vancouver, Washington.
Oh my gosh.
And no Bigfoot museum would be complete without a tribute to the Patterson-Gimlin film, of course.
Of course.
Now, I haven't reached out to the family to show the film, that's why I don't show the film here, because I don't have intellectual property rights for it. Yeah. But these are a number of the artifacts that have either been donated to the museum or brought to me. Yeah. A number of the footprint casts up above, and that's all the same animal, same trackway, so you can look at the variation in the footprints. This is interesting too. Russ Jones, Dr. Russ Jones, who lives out in West Virginia, he has, I'm not sure how many of these there are in the world. This might be the only one for all I know. But after Roger got the film, he took it on tour. And he actually played, he went to the Spokane Coliseum and the Portland Coliseum. This is at home. And he did make money on his film. He did take it on tour. But this is kind of an interesting local thing. And there's probably a few people watching that maybe even saw this at the Portland Coliseum. The question is oftentimes like, what could Sasquatch be? Like, do we have a record of it from the fossil record? And one of the contenders is this thing called Gigantopithecus blacki. Gigantopithecus is the largest ape known to have lived. However, we know the species exists from 4 or 5 mandibles, lower jaw bones, and a few hundred teeth, like 700 or 900 teeth or something. But Dr. Grover Krantz from Washington State University took the jawbone and he did a recreation of what he believes the skull might look like using various primatology formulas and whatever else, because all those measurements, they form patterns. So if he uses all those patterns, he can piece together what it might have looked like. Yeah. And sure enough, the size matches what Sasquatch should be very, very closely. Yeah, this is the Boggy Creek Theater is what we call it. We made the facade like a theater on the outside. It's a small movie theater essentially, with a movie showing, like a short film, 5 to 8 minutes long, every single one. I change it out every couple weeks, so if you come back 2 or 3 times in a month, you're going to see something new in here every single time.